Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. This episode is going to be a solo episode, meaning I will not have a guest. It is just going to be me talking. And the reason why I'm starting to do these episodes is because I have received numerous messages based on episodes that I put out asking me different questions surrounding those episodes. There have been numerous people that have mentioned start doing solo episodes that you can answer different questions and offer even more value to your audience. So that is why I'm doing this. I hope there will be many, many, many more solo episodes that I can unpack different questions that you may have. So with that said, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line Stories with Traction, and feel free to ask your question. The question that I want to answer today is based on frequency. Okay, so one of the questions I get asked quite often is how frequently do you use the same story? So someone heard something that I said in one of my episodes, they shot me a message and they had asked that question. Matt, you're always talking about a story bank and sharing stories and being strategic about stories that we're sharing. How often should we be sharing the same story? That is a fantastic question. Now, I cannot give you a very specific answer as far as a number because it all depends on the different processes that you have, and different processes in business. There are going to be more elements of sharing the same story depending on those processes. So what do I mean by that? If you're focused on sales, you can have the same story or the same group of stories that you're sharing again and again because you're talking to different prospects. So as an example, based on questions that you get from your prospects, from your clients, more than likely you probably get the same 7 to 10 questions over and over and over again ad nauseum. In fact, I would challenge you to really spell out A, B, and C, all the questions you get asked. That's a really good exercise to do. A lot of companies do that. And typically they fill those with responses, scripted responses. I challenge you to fill them with strategic stories. Okay? Do you see the difference? These stories should connect to an emotional component of your prospect. So let's say that they have a lot of concern and anxiety with something. They are very concerned about investing that amount of money in your product or service. So the underlying emotion is fear. What story are you sharing that helps them get over the mountain with their emotion due to the story you're sharing? Okay, what client story can you share that you had a prospect that was really concerned about investing that type of money? They did, and they recognized that their business flourished because of it. That's a really good story to share. So with that said, within the sales process, more than likely, you're going to have the same 3 to 9, depending on what you've identified, but somewhere under 10, 3 to 9 stories that you're sharing again and again and again with different prospects in order to flip them into clients. I never recommend sharing the same story with the same person ad nauseum. Obviously, these are different human beings that you're sharing the same story with. So as far as how frequently do you use the same story, it depends on the process. That's the sales piece. When it comes to marketing and branding, which anyone listening to this podcast episode, I don't care if you are a manager, a director, a VP, even if you're in the C-suite, where you are a CEO that runs a massive organization, you should be focused on personal branding and you should be focusing on the marketing piece. There are too many leaders that they try to delegate marketing. Okay. Do you really believe that Apple, the company Apple, would be where it is today if Steve Jobs didn't focus on marketing? There's no way. He took an active part of that process when it came to the marketing, sharing stories surrounding the marketing. He didn't say, let's delegate all of this. He took it on himself to be the leader that he needed to be and focus on marketing. I challenge you to do the same thing. Okay. So for you that you have a leadership role in your company, you need to get to the point where your sales department and your marketing department, there's a marriage of the two. There should not be infighting with those two departments. Okay. There needs to be strategy regarding marketing and sales. So with that said, from a marketing perspective, the frequency of the story, you're going to be sharing a whole lot more stories, meaning more stories than the sales piece. Because again, if you imagine your sales pipeline process, how long does it take for someone to go from prospect to client? If you say 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever that is, more than likely you're sharing stories with different people, but the same story along the way. Okay. So, but with the marketing piece, there's significantly more stories that you need to be sharing. When we're looking at entities like social media, so let's say LinkedIn, for example, because everyone that listens to my podcast knows that LinkedIn is my marketing channel of choice. If we look at a social media platform like LinkedIn, you need to be posting regularly. You need to be focusing on building your personal brand and marketing on a channel like LinkedIn regularly, numerous times a week, if not once a day, and not to scare anyone, but if you really want to go big, numerous times a day. Okay. Now we can get into the ins and outs of why that's important, but essentially you need to ask yourself how many eyeballs or ears, depending on you doing video or audio posts, but how many human beings are seeing your stuff, which lead to them going to your website or checking out your profile, which lead to messages, inbound messages, which lead to sales. Okay. So when it comes to LinkedIn, X amount of impressions leads to X amount of profile views, leads to X amount of inbound messages, leads to X amount of sales. It's not based on vanity metrics. It is based on the simple math of converting someone that is interested into a buyer. This is really important to recognize. So with that said, you're probably going to be sharing stories again and again, but you're going to add a lot more time within that. I recommend between 6 and 9 months. That's me personally, meaning if you share a really powerful story today, you need to add that into your content machine through documentation to share it half a year from now, to share it 9 months from now. Okay. And there are stories that you can share again and again every single year on a very specific day. So as an example, every time my wife has a birthday, it happens every time, the same time a year. It's not a surprise to me. She has a birthday. I am highlighting her and edifying her and all the business concepts I learned from her on her birthday. That is a story that is in that spot. Okay. Her birthday is on May 5th. Every single May 5th, I'm sharing a story regarding my wife. Okay. And you have to think about this. Significant events and holidays, you can put the same story in there again and again and again and again and again. Okay. Same story. You could tweak it a little bit that it could be used the same day every single year. So I challenge you to view and start unpacking elements of your business when it comes to different processes and figure out the frequency. Again, I can't give you a specific on you need to share this story 5 times. You need to share this story. It all depends on the situation. There are signature stories in my workshops that I have shared hundreds of times. Different audiences, they're part of my signature stories, depending on whether I'm talking at a conference and I'm the keynote speaker, or whether I am going into a company to conduct a strategic storytelling workshop. There are some stories that I share again and again because they're my signature stories that prove certain points. So the frequency is going to be different in that regard. When I am selling someone, there are certain stories that I recognize. When I share them, the likelihood I close the sale goes up. So I'm sharing the same story within that sales pipeline process. And then I mentioned the content machine as well. There are stories that I share again and again as it pertains to the marketing piece. So hopefully that answers the quote unquote frequency question on how frequent should you be sharing the same story. So hopefully you liked my very first solo episode. Again, if you have any questions regarding story strategy, communication in general, presentation, anything that pertains to the storytelling piece, you are absolutely welcome to shoot me an email at matt@mattzaun.com. I will include that in the show notes. And I will also include my LinkedIn account. You are welcome to go follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can also shoot me a message from there. And I may incorporate your question in another solo episode. So thanks for listening, and tune in next week on Friday. I will have another episode that will drop. Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.